the privacy of the people. The government is saying, the immigration minister said that we are making our immigration and asylum systems stronger, more flexible and responsive to the new and developing pressures on the country.
Yeah, so in the bill, there are a lot of areas to which I think Canadians should be concerned about. For example, one of the provisions talks about sharing personal information. And so that would allow for the government to access people's personal information. And so it really creates deep concerns of people's privacy. And it allows for the government to access your personal information without a warrant. So there are checks and balances in place, as an example. And so that's one area that people should be deeply concerned about with the legislation. Even in this bill, the name of the bill is misleading to call it Safer Border Act. But the problem with it is that many of the provisions have nothing to do with protecting our border. One of the reasons that the government's brought forward this bill, Bill-C2, is to address the Trump administration and their allegations for Canada, towards Canada around fentanyl and car theft and those kinds of things. But if you look at the bill, the provisions that have what the government needs to do to stand, what the government's giving an image, by the way, is that the people who are trying to come to Canada, who are trying to seek permanent resident status or asylum, that they are criminals.
The government claims that this is being done to secure the borders and make the country stronger, while you say that it is invasion of the privacy. So what do you feel? How can, because it's a major crisis right now, what we are seeing on the borders also, and as far as the privacy is concerned, how do you feel that will be invaded when the government is saying that we want to come up with the new system so that according to the new pressures we are able to have a better immigration system? Welcome to this episode of the Harpreet Singh Show. In today's episode, we're going to talk to Jenny Kwan, who is the immigration critic for the NDP, and we're going to focus on Bill C-2. What is this Bill C-2 and why is the opposition opposing it? Let's get over to Jenny Kwan and understand the implications of this particular bill. Jenny, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. So if you could tell us as to what is this Bill C-2 Strong Borders Act? What are the major features of this bill which the opposition feels are not good for the country?
Well, this bill is a sweeping omnibus bill that, in my view, is designed to evade scrutiny of, I think, dangerous policies for Canada. The bill proposes to amend several separate acts, I would say over a dozen worth of legislations in Canada. And in addition, they're also looking at creating new surveillance framework, all under the misleading banner of border security. The bill targets many people, Canadians, as well as those who are here with temporary status or who wants to get to Canada on a temporary status, and as well as those that are already here in Canada. So it is a sweeping bill that the government is granting itself the power to, I think, violate people's civil liberties, I think undermine due process, put into question procedural fairness, and I think also violate people's privacy. And, and the government's doing all of this without much transparency.
Right. So now, while you are saying that it is going to invade the privacy of the people, the government is saying, the immigration minister said that we are making our immigration and asylum systems stronger, more flexible and responsive to the new and developing pressures on the country. And also it is being said that law enforcement is being given more tools to secure the borders, fight the transnational organized crime, fentanyl crisis and money laundering. So the government claims that this is being done to secure the borders and make the country stronger, while you say that it is invasion of the privacy. What do you feel? How can, because it's a major crisis right now, what we are seeing on the borders also, and as far as the privacy is concerned, how do you feel that will be invaded when the government is saying that we want to come up with the new system so that, according to the new pressures, we are able to have a better immigration system?
Yeah, so in the bill, there are a lot of areas to which I think Canadians should be concerned about. For example, one of the provisions talks about sharing personal information. And so that would allow for the government to access people's personal information. And so it really creates deep concerns of people's privacy. And it allows for the government to access your personal information without a warrant. So there are no
Right.
checks and balances in place, as an example. And so that's one area that people should be deeply concerned about with the legislation. It expands the powers of immigration, whereby the government can basically they would become the judge and the executioner, if you will, on people's applications. They can decide on the admissibility or removal or
Right.
suspension of an application, and behind closed doors. And this, in my view, is a violation of procedural fairness and due process. The government talks about in the bill, not just for asylum seekers, but people who are visiting Canada with a visa, for example, they can actually deny those applications on their own without the proper process that we normally embark on. And so these are sweeping powers that the government is granting themselves in
Right.
order to be able to determine what they call as national security. We
Right.
live in a democracy, and it is absolutely critical that people's civil liberties are respected, that due process is respected, procedural fairness is respected, and people's privacy is respected.
Right. But Jenny, you also know that the system has been misused. So, what do you feel? What types of checks and balances need to be introduced so that the system is not misused by those who just take it for granted?
Well, if the government wants to target specific areas, so even in this bill, the name of the bill is misleading to call it Safer Border Act. But uh, the problem with it is that many of the provisions have nothing to do with protecting our border. One of the reasons that the government's brought forward this bill, Bill C-2, is to address the Trump administration and their allegations for Canada, towards Canada around fentanyl and car theft and those kinds of things. But if you look at the bill, the provisions that have what the government needs to do is to bring in individual amendments to separate bills in the areas to which they say they want to tackle and not lump it all together in a giant omnibus bill. They should all be separate individual pieces of legislation. We're talking about a piece of legislation that would impact at least a dozen, if not more, laws in Canada, different bills or legislation in Canada. So they should be separating those out so that we can see when you want to tackle, for example, the drug issue. These are the provisions that you want to do, and these are the powers that they're talking about, and not lump it all together. Right now, as it stands, what the government is giving an image, by the way, is that the people who are trying to come to Canada, who are trying to seek permanent resident status or asylum, that they are criminals. That's the impression that the government is giving to the public. When we're talking about asylum seekers, what do we have? Canada actually have a very robust immigration refugee board that is independent of government, independent of politics, where they will assess each claimant's application to determine whether or not they are a valid refugee asylum seeker. And we have various different provisions and with the bar to show that in fact they are being persecuted, and those decisions rest with the IRB, and they make those decisions independently. The government should not be effectively, in this piece of legislation, setting up a pre-screening process to decide who ought to be able to access that independent reviewing of your asylum claim. And so that's one thing that the government need to respect. I think Canada's independent process in determining whether or not a person is an asylum claimant. On another note, the government is putting a provision that changes those who can make an asylum claim. For example, they're putting in a 1-year limit with respect to that. So in theory, what could happen is you could be an individual who came to Canada 20 years ago, let's say, as a visitor, as a journalist, who came and made a presentation, attended a panel, or whatever the case may be. And then they went back home to their home country. And because they report on human rights issues, they, of course, then might be being targeted by their government in their home country and being persecuted for that. And so if they come back to Canada to try to make an asylum claim, they would not be able to do so under this piece of legislation, because there's a requirement that on the day in which you arrive in Canada is the date where they count whether or not you can make an asylum claim with a 1-year limitation. So that doesn't make any sense at all, but those are the provisions that the government is bringing in. You could be an individual who's actually made a visa, who's here in Canada under various different visa authorities. So take, for example, Ukrainians who are evading war in Ukraine with the illegal attack from Putin. And Canada welcomed them to come to Canada. And of course, the war has not ended. They arrived more than a year ago. Under this piece of legislation, all those individuals would not be able to make a permanent residence application through a refugee claimant process in Canada. As an example, if the government wants to say, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, Ukrainians, we're just going to send you back to your war-torn country in the middle of the war, well, have enough courage to actually say that, instead of trying to come forward with a backdoors and approach to it. For those who are defrauding the system, we already have a variety of different measures in place to target those who are providing misrepresentation through the immigration process. And those, if they are found to have misrepresented, they would actually be penalized for it. They would actually lose their right to make their application. And so those safeguards are already in place. But here, what the government is talking about is giving them powers behind closed doors for the cabinet to make decisions on their own without scrutiny. And I think that's wrong. We live in a democracy. We pride ourselves in ensuring that those kinds of decisions are not made behind closed doors. We pride ourselves to ensure that people's due process and procedural fairness are respected. The other thing that's concerning as well, when the government says if they're going to deport someone, they will say, well, but don't worry, we have safeguards in place with the pre-removal risk assessment. The pre-removal risk assessment process is severely different than a process that would allow for someone to a hearing for them to present the case, which is what we do with the IRB, where people can go forward and present the case for consideration. A pre-removal risk assessment process would not allow for a hearing to take place, and not in the same way in which it has been done currently. So removing that step is a major, major concern, I think, in the violation of people's basic rights.
You very rightly explained it. So would you term it as a draconian law that is trying to impinge on the rights and freedoms of the people?
Well, right now, the bill is still in the House of Commons for debate and is in second reading debate at the moment. And so we'll see where things go. I know that many parliamentarians have concerns with this bill, and so we will see where it goes. We're also inviting the public to provide their comments and for them to study the bill, because this is an extensive bill. And, you know, I think it's like 2 pages. I have the bill right in front of me right here. This is the bill, and it has 127 pages in it,
Wow.
impacting at least a dozen pieces of legislation. And so I would really encourage the public to take a look at this bill and see what it means and understand what it means and provide their comments to their member of parliament. If you have concerns, raise them. We live in a democracy. You're allowed to raise your concerns and to demand action
Right.
from the government.
So basically, what you're saying is that the public can ask their member parliaments what their feelings are, and they can, write them emails or go and represent what they feel, and this will be brought forward in the parliament also. Now, right, you said it's still in the reading process, but the NDP is opposing it. But as you said, it is all such a bulk document. Do you think that if the government segregates this and brings it further, the NDP can think of supporting it, like terms of law enforcement being given more tools to fight, the transnational crime, the money laundering and other issues?
Well, the NDP has not made any comment about whether or not we would oppose this bill at this point in time, but rather what we have done is raise our litany of concerns, and there are many with this bill. We are still trying to determine whether or not there is any way to salvage this bill, to make amendments to it, to make it palatable, or is it just too far gone for that to be done? The provisions, as I said, for example, if the government really wants to target fentanyl, drug trafficking, for example, well, then bring in a bill that specifically targets drug trafficking and fentanyl. Don't lump it
Right.
in with everything else. If the government wants to target, for example, car theft, to which there is an issue with car theft, then bring in a bill that actually addresses that. I also raised the question on both of those fronts. Why did the Conservatives, when they were in government, cancel the port police? And by canceling the port police, we actually saw a flood of drugs coming through the port, and then, of course,
Right.
stolen vehicles going to and from the port, as an example. And why did the Liberals, having been in government for 10 years, not bring back the port police? So, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors here. The government says this is what they intend to do, but in reality, are these provisions that they're saying within the bill that they're bringing forward under Bill C-2 will effectively address those concerns? I fear that it may not, and which is why, we need the NDP actually to be scrutinizing this bill. We need the public to be scrutinizing this bill and to raising their concerns. The government needs to be honest with Canadians on the issues. They need to actually say what they do and not to
Right.
create this sort of smoke and mirrors kind of approach with an omnibus bill that doesn't really reflect what they claim that it is doing.
Right. Jenny Kwan, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for sharing your views as to what you feel is wrong with this bill and how it can impact the freedom of the people. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
ਸੋ ਇਹ ਸਨ ਜੈਨੀ ਕੁਆਨ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ NDP ਦੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕ੍ਰਿਟਿਕ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਤੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਇਹ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਲਿਆ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਬੰਗਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਕੱਠਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਸਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੋਰ ਪਾਵਰਸ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਜਾਏਗੀ, ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਕਿ ਆਮ ਜਨਤਾ ਦਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋਏਗਾ। ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟਸ ਤੇ ਅਸਾਈਲਮ ਸੀਕਰਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਜੋ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਸੋਚ ਰੱਖਦੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਪਰੋਚ ਕਰੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟਸ ਨੂੰ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਓ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਹਮਲਾ ਹੈਗਾ, ਤੇ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਕਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਤਤਪਰ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਲੰਦ ਕਰੋ। ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਜੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਸਮਾਪਤੀ, ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋਣ ਲਈ ਆਪ ਸਭ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ। ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੋਏ ਤਾਂ 604 603 7555 ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਲੈਣੇ ਆ ਗਿਆ। ਹੈਵ ਅ ਵੰਡਰਫੁਲ ਡੇ।